It really was critical for us to try to get all the historical structures together in one location. So the bungalows wound up in the middle of the lot, and it wasn't the most efficient place, plus it didn't really bring out the historical significance. So we thought by connecting it to the existing mansion and bungalows at the front of the property, it would be a better location. We thought that's what made sense, what it used to be, and it sort of brought the history of the studio into focus. It was also important to move the bungalows so that we could begin the process of moving forward to modernize and innovate the studio. So it was an important step in the entire process for us, and a really meaningful one.
Well, I think it's extremely important to preserve the history of this studio. I mean, the fact that it has a history alone makes it valuable. There are stages in this town that don't. Thomas Ince is one of the founding fathers of film making in Southern California. But then you go on to Cecil B. DeMille, you go on to David Selznick, you go on to Desilu. I mean, E.T. was made here, Hogan's Heroes was made. There's stuff here that Ozzie and Harriet was made here. So this place does have a history, and I think that everybody who comes here enjoys that sense that they're kind of part of that history and they're really continuing it forward. This place has a heart and a soul, and it has a history, and I think we all value that, and I think we should treasure it. This project was basically about moving 4 historic bungalows that were built in the late 30s. They were homes to Clark Gable and Vivian Leigh, Olivia de Havilland, Gloria Swanson, and Orson Welles. I mean, that's all our history. And I think it's worth preserving, and it's worth keeping. And frankly, the tenants love it, that they're part of history, that they're really a continuation of what has gone on before. And I think just walking around here, they all get a sense of that, and they like it. This could be a brand new studio, it would not be nearly as exciting. There's a certain value to the history that I think makes it worth preserving. So what we had to do is take off all of the structures that stick out of these buildings, because they're gonna have to squeeze down this narrow little street. So porches had to come off, air conditioners came off of roofs, strip them down bare, cut out all the utilities, and there was a mess of pipes and conduits and all sorts of stuff going underneath these buildings. Disconnect them, basically. They slide these giant steel beams underneath them, and then they put these dollies underneath the steel beams, and they're gonna they pull them, and they roll them down the streets. It's pretty amazing. But they squeezed them through this narrow little area, and I mean, there were inches to go when they were doing it. And at one point, they were kind of hitting, and like I said, there's no dry run for this. You just kind of go for it. But they're bringing the building up, and they're not quite clearing a concrete planter bed. So they have to jack the building up a few more inches in one direction so they can clear it and squeeze it down. These guys are great. These are the same guys that moved the space shuttle. They said they moved like a 50-foot concrete building in Pasadena. So, I mean, to them, this was kind of child's play and pretty simple.
These particular buildings have been associated with Culver Studios since the 20s and 30s. So their association is almost 100 years old. They're really important in maintaining the historic significance of the Culver Studios. We couldn't have picked a more difficult relocation project. And the reason I say that is because we're relocating the bungalows to the top of the parking structure. The weight of the bungalows combined with the rigging that's required to move them is too much for the parking structure. We have to be very precise about what we're doing and think everything through really carefully. We can't just move them and build a new foundation and hook the buildings up again. So, you know, the drainage is an issue, everything is an issue. So it's a very intricate project.
There was a lot of unknowns. We had to get the right team in place to find out what they were, give us enough time to actually make this happen. We've got the best team we can, but no one here has ever done this in its entirety. Everybody has done a piece of it, but no one has ever put buildings on top of a parking structure before. We've hired a specialist crew that have gone through and embraced and secured the building to make sure that during the move it stays within its original parameters, doesn't shift around. We've removed elements from the building that would be problematic to travel. There was a couple of things that made the buildings too wide that we actually had to remove to fit through the access that we had.
I really appreciate and respect the time and energy that's going into doing the job right and really caring about the history and realizing that, it's a win-win situation for the studios and for the benefit of the public as well.
We recognize when we bought it how unique the property was and its historical place, both within the community and at the city at large. So we felt like we needed to be a really good steward, and to be a good steward, it was important for us to preserve this as some form of, content driving facility. And it's just such a cool property. At the end, it'll look great and it'll look simple, but all the hard work that went into it is quite remarkable.